You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Hello? Is that the famous astronomer, Sir Patrick Moore?
It is, very much so.
Any news on the space front?
Quite so. Elon Musk has just designed and developed 5 gigantic, state-of-the-art rocket ships. All members of Parliament, along with the American Senate, have first-class tickets aboard them, you see. They're told they're going to the moon.
Told? Where exactly are they going, Sir Patrick?
The new anomaly discovered recently astronomically. A huge black hole.
Welcome to Twin Souls. Twin Souls is brought to you in association with the Paranormal UK Radio Network, your host, Philip Kinsella. Now, today we have an amazing guest, Alyson Dunlop, all the way from sunny Scotland. And let me just explain a little bit about Alyson's credentials. She is a reverend. She's also a demonologist, an angelologist, and Mariologist, and she is also a deaconess with a classics degree from the University of Glasgow. Also, she's a writer, a radio presenter, and who's had a variety of psychic experiences across the board of the paranormal. And she also heads the SPI Scotland, researching UFO and paranormal events across the board. She's also appeared on TV to discuss various aspects of her work, especially paranormal religion and ufology. And she also hosts her very own radio program, the ADX Files, which is absolutely amazing. And you know, Alyson, I'm so delighted to have you on board today. Thank you very much for coming on.
I'm delighted to be on. Thank you very much for asking me.
No, you're very welcome, because you're very esteemed. You're very much thought of within the area of your work. And but what I wanted to ask you, Alyson, first of all, is what was it that brought you into the field of not just the paranormal investigations, but also within ufology?
Well, within the paranormal side of things, I guess I started getting into spiritualism at quite an early age, and Buddhism and paganism, and it was just a sort of an amalgamation of those things. But when I was into spiritualism, then I received, a couple of messages from people that had passed over, and I found out that my great-grandmother had also been a spiritualist. I had taken my gran to the spiritualist church, and then I found out that my sister-in-law and my brother went to the spiritualist church. Now we hadn't known any of that before I went. So it was like it was in the family, but nobody had spoken about it, which was, I suppose, weird in itself.
Yeah, because, normally with regards to anyone's connection with regards to this subject of paranormal, psychic phenomena, ufology, you tend to find some type of synchronicity that kind of connects with it, and certainly within families. So that's really amazing. And of course, from that point onwards, you must have had some real kind of like interest to explore the subject matter further.
Yes. I mean, the first major thing to happen wasn't a nice thing, and that was the incubus attack. for people who, I'm sure everybody knows what an incubus is, or the night hag syndrome, old hag syndrome. It's called many different things. And the strange thing about that was that 14 years later, I found out from James Welsh, who'd had a number of sightings of UFOs over Glasgow, that and 5 of them were in the same month that I had my incubus attack. But not only that, and I hadn't thought about that while he was telling me about these UFO sightings that he'd had. When he showed me what do you call it? It's like a photoshopped photo of what he had seen and where he had seen it, it was right above my flat.
Wow.
Yeah, and that really, I think the colour drained out of my face when he said that. He said it had just been like a plasma, and it just imploded and disappeared.
Wow,
And
that's...
Yeah, so that, I mean, I hadn't even put the two things together. Like, this, to me, this attack was demonic. And the other people that I'd spoken to online, they had mentioned jinn, the DJINN, and they had mentioned the reptilians, which I still don't really know much about. So then suddenly it went from being something, demonic, which I'd been looking into afterwards, to something possibly alien.
Well, the two sit very close to one another. I mean, with regards to any form of UFO sightings, and I know that you in Scotland have the famous Bonnie Bridge area, which is one of the places that's very famous, or had a spate of famous UFO sightings. They do appear to come with an unnaturally amount of supernatural activity. So, we have a lot of people within the movement who are divided within their thoughts about what we're dealing with, but we cannot state for a fact that it's not linked with demonology, because we hear this all the time. So, we have to be very careful. And like yourself, I've never pigeonholed myself into a bracket to say, well, this is what it is, because we just don't know. So what's your thoughts, Alyson, about this whole, UFO subject? What's your private thoughts about it, if you will?
Well, I think my thoughts on UFOs have changed over the years. I'll read articles that I've written in the past and think, maybe I'm not right maybe I shouldn't have worded it like that. Maybe I should update this to, what I think now, because you're always learning, you're always getting different experiences as you go on. And over time, I have seen 2 UFOs myself since. One at the Carron Valley Reservoir. And I was there with 5 people. Now, it's quite near Bonnie Bridge. It's not that far away from it. Maybe, 20 miles maybe. But it's within that area anyway. And I had realised through reading about UFOs that there seemed to be a connection with water, that they seemed to appear quite often near water. So I've always tried to make sky watches close to bodies of water. And so we went to this reservoir, and we'd been there the entire night. Now, I'd had some psychic experiences while I was there, but it wasn't until we were almost ready to go home, it was starting to get a little bit light. I think it was about 4:45, something like that. And this bright star that we had been watching, and thinking to ourselves, what is that? Is that a star? Is it near? Is it far? You know, it's not Sirius because it's kind of orangey and it's bigger than a star. But we hadn't paid it a huge amount of attention. And it was just as we were about to walk to the cars, this object started to move. And we realised that it was actually much closer than we thought it had been. That it went like round the reservoir and then it went over hills and disappeared. Now, when I spoke to Kevin Goodman, he said it sounded very much like the amber gamblers that they get down in Warminster. So that was one of the sightings, and the other one was in the middle of Glasgow when I was passing the Glasgow University Union, and I saw a silver egg-shaped UFO just whizzing across the sky at great speed. Now, it could have been anything, but to me it's a UFO because I don't know what it is, or what it was rather. So I just try to keep an open mind about what these things might be. I do have a tendency to try to rationalise them. To, I mean, I think that's a good thing for an investigator to do that.
Oh, yes.
You know, so there are things in the skies that we maybe have no knowledge about. There could, and that's not necessarily secret planes or anything like that. It just might be that I've never seen anything like that, but somebody else, I think, mentioned is it a blimp? It could have been a blimp, and I thought, what on earth is that? And so I had to look it up, and the light, you know, I did wonder, could that be a drone or something? But it had been steady the whole night. It had just been steady the whole night. There was no noise or anything like that. It just hung in the sky like a star. It was like disguised as a star almost.
I think it's important also to keep a rational, head with regards to this. As you say, as a respected investigator yourself, we have to be open to all forms of speculation. But I do feel that you would know inwardly that there's something not quite right about it, and this tends to change people. Did you find yourself beginning to change, or this because when people have these experiences, Alyson, like yourself, you begin to go through some type of metamorphosis of the mind, as it were?
I think I had already been going through that, because I'd had another experience with beings who appeared to me in my bedroom, and I had woken up and there was this circle in the ceiling above me with this man looking down. He was in that kind of, Star Trek-y uniform type thing. Yes. He had jet black hair and he was looking down, and as soon as he saw that my eyes were open and I was looking at him, he said to someone that I couldn't see, "We've got her." And then other people came and looked over. I remember there was a woman there, but it was another man who spoke, and he had sort of sandy coloured hair, maybe sort of light brown. And he had a different uniform than the others, so I assumed that he was a leader or something. And he said, you have to tell people about us. And I was quite obviously and understandably terrified at this point. But at the same time, elated. It was like every emotion was awake in my body. So there was elation and there was, fear, a lot of fear. And I couldn't tell whether they were aliens, whether they were angels, or whether they were gods, because all these things seemed to apply in the way that I was feeling and what I was seeing. And of course, I quickly agreed, yes, I will tell people about you. And he said, no, you must promise me that you will tell people about us.
Good Lord.
And I said, I promise I will tell people about you. And at that, my cat, Gandalf, was howling at the side of me. Now, my head was up off the pillow at this point, like I was being pulled up. And this circle in the ceiling above me, there was like a beam of light going to my forehead. So it seemed to be like either beaming into or out of my third eye chakra, where the psychic awareness is. And I kind of eventually, with this noise in the background, I eventually came out of it. My head sort of bounced off the pillow. I turned round and my cat was freaking out. He was absolutely freaking out. And he was pacing about, howling, trying to waken me up out of this. When I say waking up, my eyes were open, but something else was obviously happening, and he was really weirded out by it. So that had happened, and other things were happening at the same time. Sort of various psychic experiences following that, like seeing, one of them was seeing the Hat Man at the side of my bed, seeing an alien that was very much like E.T. the Extraterrestrial, the film. It was a bit like that, but with, it was a bit like that actually. I was going to say with rounder eyes, but I think that alien did have quite round eyes, but it was the colour of it. It was the colour of it and the size of it that reminded me of the alien in the film. So various things like that had happened round about that time, that then during sky watches I would do CE5, and I would connect with this being, we'll just call them a being, who had spoken to me and told me that I had to tell people about him. Because of my research into the people who had drawn things like this, it was anything that I could see that was familiar to me, that people had seen the same, then, because I've spoken about this in talks, I would add it into my talk, because it would help me to illustrate my experience. I'm not really an artist, so but it was interesting that other people had seen similar things to me, and one of them had seen this man that I had seen, that I'd been speaking to. It was the exact same. He was wearing the same uniform. He had the same colour hair. He just looked exactly the same. And I think, what was the term that they... Gosh, I can't remember.
The Men in Black.
No, it wasn't that. They had put something about an agent.
Right.
Alien agent or something like that.
Oh, I see.
It was words to that effect underneath it, and so I used that one as well. But during the CE5, I call this being Gabriel.
Wow.
Because I suppose he gave me a message, and because when I was looking into the similarities with ancient gods, and I found Hermes, who was the messenger god of the Greeks, and his mother was Maya, and she is one of the seven sisters. The seven sisters are the Pleiades.
Yes.
And,
wow.
And the figures of these people that these beings, rather, that people see that are in this sort of Star Trek-y type uniform, they call them the Pleiadians. They say that they are from the Pleiades. So this all seemed to tie in together and might have explained my confusion about whether it was aliens or gods or angels or whatever they were, because I think over time we have given different names to the same things.
Yes, that is amazing. That sent a chill down my spine, actually, because, literally. I mean, you hear all the time, as a researcher yourself, and, you hear all the time about, such experiences coming in multidimensional forms. And I've always argued that, we're all trying to squeeze this in the same box, but it is an individual experience after all. And this may, because you are an angelologist as well as a demonologist, I've always believed in angels. So where did this lead you, Alyson, this incredible experience? Where did this lead you then afterwards?
I suppose that was when I really wanted to get back into things, and I contacted Malcolm Robinson to find out what he was doing, and said that I wanted to get back into research and investigation and start something. And with his blessing, started SPI Scotland, which has come on leaps and bounds. We've got thousands of members now, and we do our annual conference. So that kind of led me on to that. But through that, as I say, doing sky watches and various other things. I mean, personally, I also do things like chakra meditation and yoga, things like that for spiritual development, prayer, fasting. I do all that kind of stuff for spiritual and psychic development. So I suppose it kind of put me back onto that path. I mean, there was various things like astral projection that happened round about that time, and one of those is a very strange one, this one. I felt compelled while I was in the astral plane to go to an estranged friend. I had to go to his house, and when I got there, I was pulling back the covers from his bed to waken him. I was desperately trying to waken him. Now, a year later, I got back in touch with this friend, and we had a chat, and we sort of, became friends again. And he told me that 5 or 6 years before, so there was a time difference, 5 or 6 years before, he had woken up with his covers being pulled back and been woken up, and he realised that there was something really wrong, and he got to the phone and called an ambulance, got taken to the hospital, and it was that he was having a stroke.
Oh, good Lord.
And if the doctor said to him, if you hadn't got here when you did, you would be dead.
Good Lord. My goodness me. You know, I've heard this before. Someone else has suggested this, and I heard it through conversation only last week with another friend of mine who is doing remote viewing and saying that there is a time displacement.
Yes.
Where, yes, and this is something that's very interesting. How absolutely amazing, Alyson. Wow.
Yeah, well, I mean, on the astral plane, time does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the first time that I did astral projection, you have to just tell yourself to keep calm, because the minute you sort of will yourself to stay in, then you will. But when I felt myself begin to float, it was just a case of, okay, it's happening, keep calm, keep calm. And the next thing, I was zipped up into space, and I was floating about in space. And this was delightful, I couldn't believe that this had happened. I was laughing. I was just laughing. And the next time it happened, I thought, well, I better do something while I'm up here. So I shouted out, is anybody there? Just to see what would happen. And this disembodied voice came back and said, my planet is dying. And I asked it to show me. And so we floated along. Now, I never ever saw who this was, but we floated along. It was an aerial view. But the planet that I could see was made up of luminous colours. Like when you see a picture of like a map, it might show like heat spots or like heat areas or something like that. It was like that. And the next day I was going through Facebook, and it was a newspaper article. You know how you get newspapers, you get their stories coming up. It's a newspaper article, and it was the exact same colours as in my dream or my projection. And it said underneath it, is there life on Mars?
Wow.
And so I just wondered, perhaps there had been life on Mars, and this was some, spirit being who was talking to me about it, and perhaps at some point, Mars has, for want of a better word, died.
Yes.
The life is not there anymore. So maybe that was what was meant in the experience. But it was very interesting anyway.
Yeah, I think, I've always believed that there had been life on Mars, and that it died. There is even the suggestion that we are perhaps the seeds from Mars. We just don't know. But I find the psychic part and the astral projection, all those things to do with the Akashic records and life after death, so fascinating. And I believe that most people do have these experiences to awaken perhaps the soul in us, because on this plane of reality, we kind of like in a bit of a slumber, even more so since lockdown. But, I think it's a personal experience that you are going through with your helpers and your guides. And I'm interested also, because you mentioned angels, because I'm a great believer in angels. I've seen two on two separate occasions. One was in human form, one was in its original form. But do you have any experiences with the angels, bar from those gods? I love the terminology that you used of the Star Trek people, the gods or the angels.
Yes, the angels. Now, there were certain different things that happened. One of them was coming back from hospital one day, and I had something on my mind, an argument that had broken out online the night before, and I was a bit worried that someone would feel bad about it. So all this was on my mind, and I was worrying about this. And I got to the underground, and down the bottom of the escalators, there was this man standing. I held the door open for me, but that's not, I suppose, the unusual part, but it was the way that he did it and the way he looked at me and the fact that he didn't look human. And my brain was trying to register what's different about this man. And so I just walked past and nodded, said thank you, and kept walking. And got to my flat was in the same, I should explain, was in the same street as the underground. So I just had used the escalators to go down onto the street level, and got to my gate, and there were 3 angel cards at my gate.
Oh my Lord!
And they were in German for some reason. And I went upstairs and I washed them and dried them on the radiator, and then I interpreted them as best I could, because I didn't know anybody that could do that. And they answered my problem. They answered the problem that I was having.
Wow.
And told me how to deal with it. And that was just incredible. I was like, wow.
Mind blowing.
Really, really mind blowing. Now, I think what I took from that was that the angel, or I firmly believe now that it was an angel, that it might have been Raphael, because I had seen him in a meditation, and he just looked very similar. When it's when you think of things and afterwards, but you think, is that just now because it's in my head? But when I thought about it, he looked like Raphael in my meditation. And I thought perhaps it could have been Raphael. Also because he's an angel of healing. So he brings healing to a situation, but I was also coming back from hospital. And apparently, I didn't know this until I looked into it. Apparently he's an angel of transport. And I thought how interesting it was him that I met him at an underground. Another one was I was talking to somebody, telling her that I was writing a talk on angels, and did she have any experiences that she wanted to share? And she said, no, I've never seen angels. I do believe in them, but I do pray to them, but I'm not sure if they hear me. And I said to her, I'm sure that they do hear you. And just at that point, now she was in her bedroom on Facebook. That's where we were talking, and her little boy, who I think at the time was about 3, came through the room, stopped at the door, and said, "Mummy, there's an angel behind you." Oh. And he didn't even know what we were talking about. And she asked him to describe, what is this angel, doing? What are they wearing? And he said that she was wearing red, and various different things. Anyway, he described her, and that was, again, confirmation. Had the angels had it was almost like they'd set up this whole thing. It was so weird. Now, I looked into the colour red with angels. That was another thing. and it was associated with Uriel. And only the night before, I had been thinking, do you know, I've had experiences with Raphael, Michael, Gabriel, but I don't know anything about Uriel. And the very next day...
Here it comes.
I know. The very next day, and Uriel, I can't now remember. I think it's to do with communication, but it was poignant. What his or that angel's attributes was poignant for both myself and my friend. Mm-hmm. So that was, again, that was an interesting one again.
Wow, it certainly is very interesting. I think, I know that, it's really bizarre, but also fascinating and amazing. I think that when we are in trouble, whether it be a simple matter or a complex matter, I have always believed, as you know, in the afterlife and also in the angels, they are still a mystery to me, but I've had my own help on 2 occasions with them. And of course, you would know, Alyson, from your own personal experience, it's not just witnessing the events as they unfold, but it's how they make you feel as well. I think that's the important part, how they kind of like give you that extra hope that we need here, because to believe that we are just flesh and blood creatures with a sell-by date, that we exist to live and die, and consciousness is expunged, it does not sit comfortably with my belief system. And like you, I've had my proof. So the angels are certainly, I just had this vision of them, Alyson, up on the other side, sitting around the table, and okay, we have to be a little bit, cool with it, having a few drinks and laughing about how they got through to you, and discussing. Did you see the look on Alyson's face?
No.
So that you've got to have a sense of humor and irony with this, because it certainly feels that in this way it's so beautiful and so pure within its content, and that is amazing.
Yeah, I tell you, another one was it happened about 6 months after my second kidney transplant, and I had been rushed back to hospital. I'd septicemia, and I was given a private room. It was next door to the room that I'd been in before during the transplant, and it was at a slight angle to the left of my door. And after a couple of days, this old lady was admitted into that room. Things weren't looking very good for her. Her family were very upset, and they'd taken turns to be with her during the night. And then one evening, it was round about 11 o'clock, and I was lying in bed reading, and I looked up, and outside the old woman's door, there was a dark shadow. And I really didn't like the feeling that I got from this. But I just observed it. And during the early hours, I saw members coming in, and members of the family, rather, coming in and out the room, and the doctors were telling them to expect the worst. And as I say, they took turns. They never wanted to leave her alone. But whenever there was no one standing outside the door, there was that shadow. And then it started to very slowly move towards her room, towards the door. Very, very slowly, just creeping towards the room. And I was sure, I didn't get a good feeling about this at all. I was sure it was there for the old woman. And I felt horror, utter horror, that I seemed to be witnessing some kind of dark energy that was after this vulnerable elderly person. So I did the only thing that I could think to do, and it is something that has never let me down. And that was to call upon the angels. And so I closed my eyes and I called upon the archangels, on Archangel Michael, to protect the old woman. and to give her strength. And I called upon Archangel Raphael, the angel of healing, to help her get better and stronger. And when I was sure that they were there, because I could feel them there, I demanded that dark shadow retreat and leave her alone, and that I told her she was under angelic protection. And at that, the shadow started retreating until I couldn't see it any longer. Now, that in itself is kind of creepy, but the next day, the old lady had some kind of miraculous recovery because she was up on her feet and she was so much better that she was able to be moved into a ward with others. Now, I make absolutely no assumptions. I can only tell you the facts as I personally witnessed and experienced them. But I did ask a nurse if she or any of her colleagues had ever experienced anything strange in that ward. And she pointed to the door from left to right and she said, "There's something out there. I'm convinced of it." And she said that sometimes she'd seen something passing out the corner of her eye. And then, when she found out how interested I am in the subject, she said, "You would have loved it here last week." And then she proceeded to tell me about a ward that was to the right of my room. And an old man had been lying in bed one night, and the nurses were startled by screaming. So they ran to his aid, and he shouted that he was being pulled out the bed by his feet. They calmed him down, they gave him a cup of tea, and they got him back to sleep eventually. And later a nurse went into the ward to check on him. And she was putting something into a cupboard in the room when an invisible hand grasped her forearm.
Oh.
Now, I'm pretty sure that you wouldn't have seen her for dust.
You wouldn't have seen me for dust. I would have been out of that room.
Well, you wouldn't have seen me for dust either, I tell you. I mean, I know that we're all into these subjects, but faced with it, I think you would probably run a mile.
Yeah.
It was bad enough seeing this dark shadow and just watching it with increasing horror. Thinking initially, is that in my imagination? Is it a shadow coming from somewhere else? And I couldn't imagine what it could be that was causing the shadow. And as I say, when it started to move and I realised it wasn't a shadow on the wall, it was 3-dimensional,
Yes.
And it was just the creepiest thing that I'd ever seen. But that place now, it was the Western in Glasgow, it's since been demolished. And I'm not sure what the plans are for it now. It is owned by Glasgow University. They own the site and they were planning to build a facility there. But it would be interesting to find out if that entity ever reappears, or as I hope the angelic forces did something about it and moved it on. But it would be interesting to know if something happened.
And as you're explaining this, Alyson, I mean, you are a reverend as well. You've done so well for yourself, and sometimes the course of your life will lead you into a certain area, and it seems to me like the paranormal and especially the angelic help has seemed to have made you aware of the changes and the power that you yourself have gone through, and also have in terms of the changes in the power. Now, this also might explain, because you know a lot about demonology as well, don't you? Yes.
Yes, I do. Not just the incubus attack. There's been other things have happened as well. Now, I became a reverend. I'm a deaconess with the Valentinian Gnostic Church. They're affiliated with the Metropolitan Church, which gives me the right to use the title reverend.
Yes.
You're saying you've done a lot, but I feel, to be honest, that I could do more. But it's just trying to find something that is suitable for me and suitable for the church or organisation that I join. But my calling is to be a member of the clergy, and in particular, to be an exorcist.
Yes.
And that's very much been a calling for me. And I have done one exorcism. It was in my own flat, in fact. A workman came in to fix the boiler and left something there. Now, when he came in, and when I say he left something there, he left something supernatural there.
Oh, I see.
When he came in, I got this feeling off him, this, kind of bad feeling.
Yeah.
He wasn't particularly unfriendly or anything like that, but I got a bad feeling off him. I couldn't think why. And after he left, I was not alone in the flat. I could feel the presence of something else there. I went to bed that night, and there were noises in the hallway, which I investigated and couldn't find anything out of place. I heard things like falling in the bathroom, and there was nothing out of place. So, I did go to sleep, but I probably didn't sleep that well that night, I wouldn't have said. But when I got up in the morning, I came through to the living room. I opened the curtains, and as I went to walk away, I heard this loud noise over, like, just behind me at the curtains, like a book slamming down, or a hand slamming down on top of a book. And I turned round again. I couldn't find anything that would have made that noise. And the same day, the kitchen flooded.
Oh.
At that point, I said, no, you cannot attach yourself to me. And I said it out loud. I said, this is my home. You can't attach yourself to me or my home, so you can just leave. Nothing happened for about a fortnight. And then I had a second psychic, whatever kind of attack you want to call it, by an invisible force that had a hold of my wrists. I was lying in bed, a hold of my wrists. But at this point, I've got to the point now where when things happen, I'm more angry about it. You know, I'm not so fearful anymore. And I just warned it off, you know. I said, yeah, just try it, just see what happens, you know. And then it was gone. Over the next fortnight, I would wake up and there would be scratches on the walls. There would be, at one point, the walls were actually shaking. And I thought, telling it to go away is not enough. I need to do an exorcism in here. So I did a major clean of the flat for starters, and tidied up, and then I did a major cleansing, spiritual cleansing, with, you know, the incense and candles and blessed salt and holy water, and I did the whole flat, every single room, every single wall. And at the end of that, a few days later, sitting in the living room, it was like 1,000,000 hailstones were hammering on my ceiling. Like the hailstones would hammer on glass. It was that noise, but it was coming from the ceiling. And I asked the woman upstairs, had anything happened? Nothing had happened that night. She had no idea what it might have been. It was so loud, and I'm thinking, what is going on up there? How can she be made? I couldn't figure out how the noise could be made, you know. Now, just after that, because I was also writing a talk on demons and demonic possession and exorcism, so I was reading this book called, I think it's Get Thee Behind Me, Satan, or something like that. And in that, the priest had described pretty much everything that I've described. The scratches in the walls, the walls shaking, and at the end of the exorcism, this sound of hailstones on the ceiling. And he said that this is the energy leaving. It's dissipating and leaving. And that's what he had put that down to. It's the only time that I've read about it. So I hadn't read about it prior.
There's a famous picture, isn't there, of a holy man and Satan, and I think that they've used that "Get Thee Behind Me, Satan" in the terminology of that. But certainly, as a reverend as yourself, demonologist and angelologist, I mean, it certainly gives us a bigger picture, doesn't it, of what may be occurring on different levels of vibrations of reality.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I've always had an interest in the afterlife. It consumes my life. But I have to ask this question of you, Alyson. Do you believe in heaven in terms of there being a hell as well?
Do you know, the jury's out for me because I really don't know what happens when we die. Some people believe in reincarnation. Heaven and hell, I don't think I believe in that as such. But I certainly believe in an afterlife.
Yes.
I think perhaps we go back to some kind of source. Maybe we get the opportunity for our souls to come back if we need to. I don't know if we're given a choice about that, but I've heard people saying that they've had experiences where they've been given a choice. And I can only really go by what other people have experienced. But as for myself, I mean, I've had flashbacks of what could be previous lives. One, it was just a very brief flashback to being a young boy, and I was standing watching gladiators in the ring. So it was in ancient Italy somewhere. And that was strange. It was so clear, but I also felt I wasn't really meant to be there. This little boy that I wasn't supposed to be there, and he was just sort of peeking out through the crowds to see the gladiators. So that was one, and another was tied in possibly with Isadora Duncan.
Oh.
Maybe. It's a quite a long and complicated story, but I just briefly, I had been in the passenger seat of a car and we were driving along to Glans Castle, and the next moment I was in the passenger seat and it was in a different car. I was dressed differently, but part of my consciousness was also outside the car, viewing it from the outside. And I could see that I was like in 1920s maybe style, 1920s, 1930s. The car was a big car. I can't remember. I did look up cars to see what was the closest, and I've written it down in the book that I'm writing, but I can't see it just now. And this woman was crying. Now, I revisited that situation in a meditation when I was at a psychic development class. And when I got there, the woman was outside the car. It was like there'd been a crash or something, but she was lying face down.
Oh.
And I said to her, just as I bent down to speak to her, an angel appeared. He was dressed in black and white. He looked kind of black hair, and he was an angel, but there was a slightly sinister look about him. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way I can say it. It wasn't that he was bad or good, but there was just something that was unnerving about him. And I said to her, don't worry, someone is here to help you, and they'll take you to where you need to go. And the angel picked her up, and as he was, he just sort of started to levitate up the way. As he started to do that, I said to him, I quickly thought to say to him, "What's your name?" And he gave me his name, Zachariel, he said. I'd never heard of Zachariel, so I had to go and research that and look that up. And it turns out he's an angel of memory.
Oh, good Lord.
And there's various other things about him. As I say, it's a much longer story than we can fit into an hour. But that was another experience that I had. And Zachariel appeared several times when I was out doing investigations, or once when I was giving a reading to someone at a psychic development group. He came, and it was him that was giving me the information about this man. It wasn't me just reading this man, I suppose people will probably say to you when you're looking to somebody and giving them a message, the message is coming from your guides. Mm-hmm. But part of that is also picking up things from the person as well, mm-hmm. on a psychic level. But all the information that I was getting for this man was coming from Zachariel, and it was spot on. Mm. It was spot on. With his daughter was abroad. She lived in, I think it was Canada, and he felt guilty about something to do with this, and it was all, it was all correct anyway, and he was quite astonished, but also by the end of it, he was quite comforted by his reading. So it certainly was. The angels have been exceptionally helpful to me between, that's just a few things that I've told you about, but they've been exceptionally helpful to me. I always say to people, you should, if you've got a problem, ask the angels, because they have never let me down when I've needed their help.
That's amazing. I think, instruments like yourself, Alyson, are needed in this world now, because more and more people are becoming more awake. I think that the ways of the old are beginning to slip and shatter, and I think people are now questioning their reality. So I think what you're doing is absolutely incredible, and I've been absolutely fascinated by the experiences that you've gone through, and of course there are experiences that will be with me for a long time, because you're anyone that says anything to me, it's like it's not just discarded. I suck it up, and it's like, wow, that is incredible. So where are you wanting to take things now, Alyson?
Well, I really do want to become an exorcist. As I say, I've only done that one exorcism in my own house, but I really do want to help people in that way, and I feel like I've been called to do that. So it's just a case of I think being more getting more training. I would love to do the Vatican course on exorcism if they would allow me to do that. I would really like to do it. They do a course annually. So that would be interesting, I think.
Yeah. And the book you're working on, Alyson, what have you got a title for your new book that you're working on?
The book, the title changes from day to day, but at the moment I've called it Mystic Visions.
That's really nice. I think with
the subtitle Spontaneous Supernatural Visions, A Quest for Meaning and the Journey to the Divine Self.
Wow, that sounds really awesome, Alyson. That sounds really interesting. And I think, it's very wonderful that you up in Scotland, and of course, Malcolm Robinson, the lovely Malcolm Robinson, as we know, has gone back up home to Scotland as well. He's back there now, bless him.
Yes.
Gone through a bit of a difficult time, God love him. But, it's wonderful the work that you have done and you are doing. And, I want to thank you so much, Alyson, for coming on Twin Souls, and I'm sure a lot of people will find your experiences and your knowledge very interesting and helpful to them as well. So have you got any last words you want to send out of wisdom to your listeners, Alyson?
Last words. Last words.
Not last rites, last words.
I'm not sure. I think that I guess if anyone wants to experience more, then meditation is a good place to start. But I think just be careful of what you're doing when you do this kind of stuff. Maybe join a psychic development group where you won't get into bother, because you can, and you should learn how to for psychic attack, how you defend yourself. Psychic defense, and protection. And grounding and things like that. All these things are important, not just the I'll sit here and try to communicate with something. It's important first that we learn how to protect ourselves from what we might encounter.
Good advice, Alyson. Absolutely amazing. And how can people find you, Alyson?
I have a website, AlysonDunlop.com. And they can also join SPI Scotland. We've got a Facebook group there. If anybody wants to email me, then they can email me at spiscotland@gmail.com.
Wonderful. That's absolutely amazing. And Alyson, we want to thank you so much for coming on board for Twin Souls. It's been a real honor indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, go look up Alyson Dunlop, Reverend Alyson Dunlop, an author and a demonologist, angelologist, and, amazing producer and host of the ADX Files, which Alyson hosts herself. And good luck to you, Alyson, and thank you so much for coming on board. It's been an honour.
Thank you. It's been an honour for me as well. I should actually say, just in case my husband is perturbed, it's Alyson Dunlop Shane's now.
Yes, that's right, because you are married now to a good guy, and that is amazing. And we're so happy for you and your husband. And but it remains for me to say thank you so much, Alyson, and good luck for your future. We'll always stay in touch. And you've been listening to Twin Souls. It's part of the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Your host, Philip Kinsella, our esteemed guest, Alyson Dunlop. And I want to thank everyone indeed. So stay safe and keep watching the stars.